Imagine waking up to headlines that your home, one of the most remote, icy lands on Earth, has suddenly become the focus of a global tug-of-war. On one side, the President of the United States hints he wants to buy it. On another, major powers eye vast mineral wealth beneath the thick ice. Meanwhile, your territory's historic ties to Denmark hang in the balance. Welcome to Greenland, the world's largest island, where the melting Arctic is unlocking not just new sea routes, but also boundless possibilities and daunting challenges. Greenland's area exceeds 2 million square kilometers, with nearly 80% blanketed by a permanent ice sheet. Around 56,000 people live here, most of them of Inuit heritage. Though it's officially within the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenland holds broad autonomy. It's different from Denmark in nearly every way: geography, culture, climate, and economy. Yet the world's attention has surged with Donald Trump openly suggesting a purchase of Greenland during both of his presidential terms, igniting debates over the island's future. Trump's renewed comments about Greenland emerged around the time he cited territorial ambitions for the United States, referencing both Greenland and the Panama Canal. The President of Panama and Danish leaders all denounced these statements. Even so, Washington's interest reflects something bigger: Greenland's strategic position and natural riches. Climate change and global power shifts have made Greenland a major piece on the geopolitical chessboard. Though talk of the US buying Greenland might seem shocking, American interest dates back to the mid-19th century. In 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia and briefly considered buying Greenland. No deal happened, but the island's strategic value only grew with time. During World War II, while Denmark was under Nazi occupation, America protected Greenland, then withdrew after the war but kept watch. By 1946, President Harry Truman tried again, offering $100 million in gold for the island. Denmark declined. Yet cooperation continued, especially as both countries joined NATO. In 1951, Denmark granted permission for an American base at Thule, now Pituffik Space Base. Throughout the Cold War, this base provided a critical vantage point in case of a Soviet attack. Today, Pituffik remains essential for US defense. It houses radar systems, fighter jets, and a station for polar orbiting satellites. Greenland sits on the shortest route between Washington and Moscow, thus vital for missile detection. Renewed tensions with Russia have reignited American concern about the Arctic. Russia has been rebuilding Soviet-era bases and deploying icebreakers. Submarines on the Kola Peninsula could threaten Atlantic sea routes if they slip undetected past Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. Because Greenland's coastline is vast and sparsely populated, Denmark's small Arctic patrol force struggles to cover it effectively. Some analysts call Greenland a security black hole, fueling US anxiety about any foreign power establishing a foothold there. Another layer is Greenland's extraordinary resource potential. Beneath the island's frozen terrain lie significant amounts of rare earth elements: graphite, uranium, zinc, copper, iron ore, nickel, and possibly vast oil and gas deposits. Rare earths are central to modern technologies: smartphones, electric vehicles, and advanced weapons systems. China currently dominates production and processing of many of these minerals. Western governments see Greenland's resources as an alternative supply. However, getting to those minerals isn't simple. Infrastructure is minimal. Ports are often ice-choked, and Greenland's population is far too small to meet labor demands for large-scale mining. Outsiders would need to build roads, ports, and facilities, making everything expensive. Ecological concerns and local opposition also shape policy. Greenlandic politicians are torn between economic opportunity and preserving culture. Denmark, for its part, wants to keep Greenland in the kingdom. Though only 50,000 or so people live there, Greenland makes Denmark far larger on the map. It also grants Denmark and the EU an Arctic presence, along with a claim to the geographic North Pole. But Denmark historically subsidizes Greenland with about $500 million each year, covering more than half the local government's budget. That sum underscores Greenland's dependence, but it also aggravates some residents who want independence or new international partnerships. Most polls indicate that a majority of Greenlanders favor independence someday. Yet the economics of going it alone remain complex. Greenland lacks enough tax revenue to replace Danish funds, so it might need foreign investors. This is where the United States could theoretically come in. It already maintains Pituffik Space Base and invests in Greenland's infrastructure. Some say the US might buy the island outright, as it did with Alaska and the US Virgin Islands, but many Greenlanders dislike the idea of being purchased. Denmark also dismisses any suggestion of selling. And in today's world, it would severely damage America's alliances if it strong-armed Denmark over Greenland. Even so, from a purely economic angle, some observers estimate Greenland might be worth tens of billions or more if mineral resources pan out. Residents could become affluent if royalties soared, but achieving that means more development, environmental risk, and social disruption. There's also talk of a Compact of Free Association, a relationship the US has with Micronesia and the Marshall Islands. This framework would let Greenland govern itself fully while ceding defense in certain matters to the US, ensuring minimal corruption in handling minerals. In theory, Greenland would gain security and access to American systems, while Washington would keep adversaries at bay. Critics, however, warn that this might still erode Greenlandic identity and culture, especially with an influx of foreign capital and labor. Beyond minerals, Greenland's location could transform global trade as climate change melts Arctic ice. Routes like the Northwest Passage, the Northern Sea Route, and eventually a direct transpolar route are opening. Greenland sits at a strategic crossroads that could rival the Panama or Suez Canals in the future. Controlling or partnering with Greenland offers potential power over these new lanes, which will shorten shipping times between Asia, Europe, and North America. Both Russia and China show interest in controlling Arctic shipping corridors. The US and Europe thus want a friendly government in Greenland to keep those lanes open to allies. Greenland also struggles with its colonial legacy. Danes once pursued policies that Inuit communities see as oppressive, such as birth control programs decades ago. Investigations have stirred tension, reinforcing calls for independence. With an upcoming Greenlandic election, local politicians are pushing an agenda built around resource autonomy and potential independence. Many Greenlanders say they want to chart their own destiny, not to become part of the US or remain perpetually subsidized by Denmark. But the path is fraught. Serious mining requires enormous capital. Greenland's government is small and has limited administrative capacity to manage global investors. It also fears corruption or environmental disasters. Meanwhile, if Greenland opted for independence, it would have to defend its massive territory alone or rely on alliances. That means forging deals with powers like the US, Canada, or others. Some Greenlandic voices argue that independence plus a tight US security partnership could work. Others want to maintain Denmark's umbrella. Another possibility is partial independence while negotiating separate defense or economic treaties. As for the United States, it has little need to forcibly acquire territory in modern times. The US already stations significant forces at Pitufik Space Base. Denmark has cooperated with American defense requests, sending troops to various NATO missions. Indeed, Denmark's contributions to the war in Afghanistan were among the largest per capita. Despite Trump's remarks, Denmark has been a loyal ally for decades. Any attempt by the US to coerce Denmark would undermine that alliance, create chaos within NATO, and possibly embolden nations like Russia or China to defend their own territorial expansions. Despite the controversies, the main impetus remains. Greenland's strategic profile will grow as the Arctic environment warms. The rest of the world now grasps that the island boasts immense mineral deposits and a future trade route position. Some foresee Greenland growing wealthier if it allows responsible development of its resources. Others fear outside exploitation or corruption. Much hinges on how Greenlandic leaders handle foreign proposals and whether they can negotiate on equal terms. One key question is whether the island's cultural identity and environment can survive a rush of newcomers. Even moderate mining requires a workforce in the hundreds or thousands. That's huge for a population of barely 56,000. Local communities might be drastically outnumbered if big projects launch simultaneously. The social fabric could shift, reminiscent of certain Gulf states that imported foreign labor and transformed overnight. Greenlanders worry they could lose control of their resources in future if deals are cut behind closed doors. Yet inaction means the island remains heavily subsidized. Climate change is melting Arctic ice anyway, so foreign interests can only intensify. China has tried investing in Greenlandic mining and infrastructure. Western nations, especially the US, want to prevent Beijing from securing a foothold. For Greenland, the competition among superpowers brings opportunity and risk. Money, development, and improved living standards are possible outcomes, alongside potential pollution, cultural disruption, and outsider dominance. Denmark must also step up. It's begun increasing defense spending for Greenland and working more closely with American and NATO partners to monitor the far north. From dog-sled patrols to upgraded satellites, the kingdom is trying to close security gaps. But Greenland is huge and Denmark is small. Collaboration with NATO is likely the only practical solution. For Greenlanders hoping for self-rule, tying defense to NATO might preserve the territory's stability without heavy internal costs. Still, final decisions on sovereignty ultimately rest with Greenland's people under the 2009 agreement. They can hold a referendum and potentially break away. No single path offers an easy fix. If Greenland becomes independent, it risks immediate economic shortfalls. If it remains with Denmark, it may feel stifled politically. If it seeks a deal with the US or China, it could lose some autonomy in other ways. Many are calling for cautious development of mining, giving local communities time to adapt. Meanwhile, outside nations have huge stakes in what happens here, because so many strategic interests converge on this one island. Regardless of whether the US attempts any formal purchase, invests via a free association, or simply expands its base, Greenland has become a pivot point in modern geopolitics. Global powers no longer view it as a remote Arctic outpost. It's more a gateway to future shipping routes and a potential treasure trove of critical minerals. As Arctic ice recedes, Greenland finds itself in the spotlight, deciding how to approach wealth, security, and identity. Ultimately, Greenlanders deserve to determine their own destiny. Their vote should guide what happens next, be it independence, continued ties with Denmark, or alternative arrangements. Outsiders can offer money or partnerships, but local wishes remain paramount under international law. The question is whether superpower competition will overshadow Greenland's own voice. If history is any indication, territory acquisitions shaped by outside agendas rarely end smoothly. Yet Greenland's small population and limited resources for defense and administration make it hard to navigate these immense global forces alone. Still, the world will watch how Greenland, Denmark, and the US handle this unfolding drama. Will Greenland maintain the status quo, push for independence, or negotiate fresh deals with Washington? Denmark insists Greenland isn't for sale, but also can't ignore the island's rising desire for self-determination. Meanwhile, the US aims to keep its foothold while preventing rivals like China or Russia from expanding into the Arctic. Greenland's future is the Arctic's future, a crossroads of climate, commerce, and potential conflict. As the ice melts, more resources and routes will appear, magnifying Greenland's role. Investment could bolster local communities or become an unchecked resource grab. Security concerns could unify Western allies or spark friction. The only certainty is that Greenland is no longer on the periphery of world affairs. Its path will hinge on delicate negotiations among Denmark, Greenland's own leadership, and powerful nations eager for Arctic influence. For now, Greenland stands on the threshold. Could it soon become a major source of rare earths, enabling an economic boom? Or will it remain mostly untouched, reliant on Denmark's subsidies? Will the US base expand if tensions with Russia escalate further? Every scenario depends on how Greenlanders strike a balance between independence, alliances, resource development, and cultural preservation. And as that ice recedes year by year, the stage is set for an ever larger global audience to follow Greenland's every move.